hold this over to the corner here? That'd be all right.
Sure.
Let's do that. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me here. I was asked by Megan's office to come give a brief update on what's going on in the Capitol Boulevard corridor, and specifically I want to talk about Capitol Boulevard from downtown to the Beltline. That was part of our emphasis that we did several years ago. We had a corridor plan for Capitol Boulevard that was adopted, and it covered that stretch of there we go. So roughly from the start of the downtown area here out to 440, just shy of the 440 interchange. And what it was sort of a comprehensive strategy for how we wanted this corridor to change and evolve over the next 30 years. It had a significant transportation component associated with it, as obviously it's a major transportation corridor. We also looked at land use provisions, and really spent a lot of time looking at the environmental considerations in the corridor. Pigeon House Branch, I think as many of you know, is a very challenged stream, and one of the emphasis points in the study was to look at how do we restore the health and vitality of that stream. It's a big challenge because I think many of you know that stream system comes from the Cameron Village area and drains into this stream system. So as such, it's historically had a lot of issues associated with picking up some of the runoff through that area. Several portions of that stream have been covered up north of P Street. And so there was a lot of discussions about how do we go through and do a stream restoration effort as part of this entire strategy for improving the corridor. So I'm happy that a lot of those things that we've put in place are now starting to move forward. And you're actually starting to see, obviously you see a lot of the construction that's happening out there, but we've made a lot of movement, especially for the portion that's to the north of Atlantic Avenue with regards to a lot of the flood-related bylaws. I'll touch on that briefly. But as you can see right now, the area is under construction. It's going to get worse. I'm telling everybody, it's going to be. I always tell people that when we do major construction projects, it's a lot like making an omelet. You have to break eggs to make an omelet, and there's a lot of eggs on this one. It's going to be a really fantastic omelet when it is done.
What's the timeline, Eric?
Construction should be finished by 2019, end of 2019. So let's see. It's on the timeline here. Here we go. So if you're curious about what's actually taking place out there, the corridor plan, when it was adopted in 2012, looked at the Capitol Boulevard interchanges at P Street and at Wade Avenue. So in this image, north is to your right, and we wanted to look at fundamentally extending sort of the downtown footprint up to P Street. So, and part of that was not just the street system, but also the development pattern as well. So we wanted to have an interchange and a street design that complemented that goal of being able to extend the downtown pattern up to P Street. And so many of you are familiar with what's there today. It's what's known as a half cloverleaf design. And so you've got the frame with the diamond and the two loops. So what was really interesting was that as we were developing the corridor plan, in the middle of this planning process, we started around 2010, DOT came forward and said, hey, we have a need to replace these bridges. So our timing could not have been better. They became participants in the study with us and worked through the public process, and it was actually one of the more successful public processes that we've had, because we were able to go out to our final public meeting, and in doing so, we took the entire corridor plan. We had DOT's team there doing their initial public outreach associated with these projects. We also had transit staff in the room, and then there's a future conversation about high-speed rail. So we had all these components in the room at the same meeting at the same time, and people got to go station to station, and people came up to us and said, wow, I see how all these things fit together. So that was really refreshing.
Can you point out P Street?
Yes, so P Street is right here. Okay, so all things are referenced by food. Finch's was right there.
Okay.
Oh, this is oriented east.
Yes, I'm sorry, north is to the right.
I was gonna say, P Street runs east-west.
My apologies, yes, but I have map turned sideways just so you can see everything a little more easily. But the things that we looked at with both interchanges in the Capitol Boulevard plan was to, one, make the P Street interchange a lot more urban in scale, again, in keeping with the idea of extending the downtown pattern up to P Street. And then we looked at some options for Wade Avenue. So part of the conversation with this was DOT was very willing to work with us on being able to implement some of these changes, but the caveat was, city, if you want these elements to go into place, then you're gonna have to pay the delta on what the state would normally have paid for a conventional half cloverleaf replacement interchange to go back in. So we worked with the city council to talk through both alternatives, and what ended up happening was that we were looking at a more conventional diamond interchange here and some access into the rail yard with this. That ended up being about an $18 million delta for us to have to pay for the difference in cost to go up. This ended up, I think, being about a $15 million delta total. And we looked at what we had in terms of funding. We ended up going outside and supplementing our funding with funds through the local Metropolitan Planning Organization. And so there ended up being about $9.7 million total of city transportation bond funding that went into this project. And so, but we looked at everything and said, we don't have enough money to do all the things that were recommended in the plan. And the conversation with the city council was, we would allow DOT to go forward with a conventional, this is known as a trumpet style interchange, allow DOT to go back in with the replacement as is with minimal extra cost to the city on this one. And then we wanted to go forward with the vision here. What's happened since this project has gone forward has been that now Kane Development came in with the notion of redeveloping this block through here. This is where Harrington Street comes up and currently makes a curve. The intention of the project was to extend Harrington Street to connect directly to P Street, get rid of that curve, and so you'd have a piece of Johnson here and a piece of Johnson here. So I can show you how that all fits together. And so what's happening now is that the construction, this piece of Harrington with the curve has now been abandoned. Harrington Street will now extend north-south through here and take a piece. And then Johnson Street is being realigned by this development, realigned here as part of the Estates project, and will now be a direct connection from Capitol Boulevard directly to the south. So that's what the revised street plan is going to look like. And what's interesting about it all, when it all comes at the end of the day, is because of the fact that we converted a lot of these left turns. One of the more predominant traffic movements here is traffic exits off of Capitol Boulevard, makes a left turn here, and then goes into downtown.
Yeah, that was
But it
crazy.
tries to, after waiting.
That was a
It tries to.
dangerous
Traffic
spot.
tries to.
The bane of all traffic engineers is left turns. So we converted those all into right turns. Basically, this is what's known as a square loop configuration. And so in doing so, we actually increased the efficiency of the interchange fairly substantially, but realized the street system. And now all of that development that we were trying to incentivize with this has now come to the fore. So Kane's moving forward with a multi-story mixed-use project anchored by a grocery store here. We anticipate that this interior part of the square, where DOT's conventional half cloverleaf is a very inefficient design as it relates to the use of the land. This now allows for the land inside of the square loop to be developed, and then we preserve everything to the north as part of the restoration of Devereaux Meadow.
The Kane project is a brownfields project because of historic pollution there.
That's correct. That's correct. That's my understanding. So a key strategy of the downtown plan, of the Capitol Boulevard plan, was Devereaux Meadow. So years ago, the city had intent of looking at selling this land off for development. As we got into the meat of the study and started looking at the land, looking at floodway and floodplain, we had the realization during the study development that this was a poor candidate for development. And we went to the city manager at that time and said, we don't think that this is an asset that we can sell off and really get a big return at from a development standpoint. But what we think is we've identified the need from a park circuit area standpoint that we need to have additional parkland. This land has a rich history relative to being Devereaux Meadow Park and the ball field. Those of you that aren't aware, there was a baseball stadium that was there. That was Raleigh's minor league team up until the early 1970s. The land was all claimed by the city, and we've got Vehicle fleet services had a depot here. We had solid waste services, a lot of truck storage here. It's all hardscape. So the strategy from the plan was sort of a two-pronged approach of converting this land back into open space, into a park, and affecting a stream restoration project to help with restoring the health and vitality of Pigeon House Branch that we talked about before. So my understanding is that our Parks and Recreation staff are now working with our stormwater staff on initial environmental screenings associated with the site. The idea is to set the groundwork for a future project here. I think that if I can interpolate from what a normal stream restoration project looks like, if you're familiar with the Rocky Branch stream restoration over by NC State, what would likely happen is that the stream would be completely daylighted. I think that, in fact, that channel right there is covered and topped today. At least I know it's got, it's not top, I know it's got hard channelization associated with it. This would be vegetated. The stream would have some more sinuosity introduced into it. The bridge access that's here, the access is off of West Street, would remain in place as a means of accessing the park from West Street, and there'd be no access on Capitol Boulevard. Now everybody asks us, can you put the baseball field back? And the answer is no, unfortunately. Again, this goes back to the limitations of the floodplain. I'd lobby that we at least need a T-ball field symbolically to put baseball back in the park. We'll see what happens with that.
Where is it contemplated that the soccer stadium would go?
The soccer stadium conversation, as I understand it, is south of P Street and more in the area of the northern portion of the state government complex. And that's
Rob, what they drew for the soccer complex would have taken the Archdale building down.
That's correct.
And another building.
And another building.
Yeah. And so that's not contemplated in the Capitol Boulevard.
It wasn't the legislature building, unfortunately.
That would have been
It's too bad.
Well, and while we're talking about alternative uses, I know it's on the other side of the piece, but you know, the county has a site right there before the railroad track. And what, you know, the city was smart and moved our general services stuff out to Raleigh Boulevard.
Yes.
Are they considering, I mean, that's now become some very valuable, more useful, they could fund the schools better if they did.
And one element of this is that we have a planned street extension of North Street that would run along the very southern boundary of that property and connect into Capitol Boulevard here. So another extension of the street grid, another permutation of opening this area up. That wouldn't happen until this piece of property is redeveloped. My understanding is, I'm not aware of any active conversations from the county. As we talked with them about this a while back, they said if somebody will pay for us to have a replacement facility somewhere else, we'll happily vacate this property. This does serve a pretty vital role for a lot of law enforcement, from what I understand. They have a fuel depot here, but I'm not aware of any active plans by the county to redevelop that. You raised your hand, wait. Okay.
I'll go after Brian.
Is there a ramp off Capitol down to Johnson?
Yes. So there's an old
It's not a
frontage
direct- It's not
road.
a direct connection.
Yes. Yes, it's going to be a direct
It's
connection.
a direct connection to Capitol without any sort of ramp or.
Well, so let me explain. This, and let me show you the other image here. So the old frontage road component is going away. There's a little bit of an old frontage road system that's out there, and that's going away completely. And so, Brian, there'll be
You got a decel lane basically that runs all the way back across the bridge.
that's right. There's a short decel lane through here, and then it comes across.
Gotcha.
Did I hear you say that final curve is in Harrington Street at the northern end that brings it into whatever that is being eliminated?
Correct. And so what's going to happen is, we've already worked with DOT to pull this component out of the project. The development's taking care of the street extension across here, and it'll line directly into Johnson Street and carry you directly into Glenwood South. So the nice thing about this is, as I mentioned before, one, we turned all these left turns into right turns here, and two, to get to Glenwood South, you don't have to get off here and meander back. You come directly off of Capitol into Glenwood South. So let's see. So
Eric, I have a couple questions. So by the fact of daylighting, the creek, because there's so much stormwater and then flooding that happens under that overpass on P Street. And I'm wondering, you know, with that intense development of Canyon, it's like a 12-story building or something, right? So all this extra stormwater, how is that being mitigated, you know, and some of the flooding concerns there that, and that dip of Peace Street?
So two aspects of that. One, this is already hardscape, so the runoff that's coming from this shouldn't be any worse than what it is today. This is already
Okay.
completely
Yeah.
urban hardscape.
Okay.
DOT is replacing the culvert as part of that, so the capacity of that should change as part of this. That's one of the active functions that's taking place right now.
Yeah.
P Street is neck down to 3 lanes through there, moving back and forth
Yeah.
as part of the construction. The next big phase of construction on this is that, if you can't tell, the alignment of Capitol Boulevard is shifting slightly. The gray on here is existing pavement, so Capitol Boulevard is shifting to the west. Again, north is to the right of the screen here. So this is what's under construction now, and then they'll start to shift traffic over and demo some of the existing and build back the new full bridge once that's done. Key components of this that we were pretty adamant about was getting rid of the Jersey barrier and lovely green glare screens that we have down Capitol, and putting an honest to God grass median down the middle that can be landscaped. Yeah, so this is a gateway corridor to downtown, and we want it to really shine, and so that's why we're placing the emphasis on this that we have so far.
Well, I've got a question along.
Sure.
So it's gonna be wide where you go on, you know, the new bridge is clearly gonna be very wide. And I assume there are bike lanes and all of that. But then when you get to the railroad bridge, it's not being addressed.
That's correct, and the width down here, this is fixed. That's exactly right.
That's the other railroad bridge by the Shell station there.
Down here, that's correct. Yeah. And those bridges belong to CSX Railroad, and so any replacement or maintenance associated with them will be the responsibility of the railroad. We got a lot of questions during the project development that, hey, you're finally replacing the bridge on P Street. And we're like, it's not that bridge. It's the other bridge. So,
When the trucks get stuck.
yeah, the one that trucks get stuck in.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So
Oh, that-
that bridge is right up here. That bridge is owned
Yeah.
by Norfolk Southern, and that's their responsibility. So let's see, so we've talked about the interchange through here. Again, we're going back in with the conventional trumpet. One of the key strategies also was developing a greenway access from downtown along the Capitol Boulevard corridor and connecting to the northeast and ultimately into the Crabtree Creek Greenway. And that kicks in right up here around Six Forks. And so the first leg of that is taking place with this. So as part of the park development, there will be a greenway linkage. Beverly, you mentioned bike. We're not doing bike lanes on Capitol Boulevard. Or not,
No, on P Street.
there are bike lanes on P Street. That's correct. And we
No,
will
I
have
don't think you should do bike lanes on Capitol.
Thank you. We can.
No more bike lanes at all until we have mass transit.
So there will be a greenway linkage on here, and you can see it on the plans, I think. Let's see. Yeah, so what we've got is a greenway linkage that runs under the Wade Avenue Bridge. This is the new bridge that's under construction now, being built next to the old bridge. And what will happen is that DOT there'll be a period when they're ready to shift traffic over, they'll close traffic on Wade Avenue and shift traffic over to the new bridge, and then start to decommission and deconstruct the old bridge. So it should make, this should make this part of the loop over here a little easier to navigate. But you can see we're gonna have a greenway linkage that comes underneath the bridge here and ties back in. There'll be a pedestrian crossing here along the ramp. And then that lays the groundwork for us to make the greenway connection along Capitol and along the frontage road system and back up to Fairview and connect the Five Points. So that starts to create the groundwork for a strong connection into the 5 Points area for bike and ped.
Flashing light,
What's that?
a flashing light like over on Boulevard.
No, because it's only crossing one lane of traffic, and there's good sight lines through there. So it should be a relatively easy pedestrian crossing. However, we'll monitor it and see if there's any need for anything additional beyond that. So as part of the implementation strategy, a lot of the properties through here, there's a couple things to point out. the long-term plan, right now, Capitol Boulevard is bifurcated into separate north and south. If you're familiar with that area, you know that the northbound lanes are over here, the southbound lanes are over here. So a key part of the strategy was to unify Capitol Boulevard and make it one north-south corridor that follows what's currently the southbound lanes. The northbound lanes will end up being an extension of what's now Wake Forest Road. What in the plan is intended to be renamed as Person Street. And this is referred to as the Person Street extension. So this section of road would actually be narrowed through here, and Person Street would extend along what's currently the northbound lanes of Capitol, run behind the creek and connect to Crabtree Boulevard. So it would provide for a much better human scale access for all these properties along this portion of Capitol here. And then all these lands in the middle, the flood prone properties, are intended to be converted to parkway. And so the city has been progressively working on buying out these pieces of property through here with the use of federal flood buyout monies through, I believe it's through FEMA. Some of you may be more familiar with that program than I am.
Who's in charge of the planning that is happening there? That's something you've talked about as a board before.
I don't know if that is Stormwater or Parks and Rec that's been working on the plantings.
They've been in partnership a little bit on that.
Yeah.
We've talked with both groups. I think Stormwater, different pieces that are different groups, but there's a couple, if you guys want to.
Yeah, because
about that.
we've
Yeah.
specifically talked about the need for it to be, instead of just trees, which they have put a lot of them out there, which is good, but pollinators and other things too.
But
Huh?
I think stormwater was leading that Brown.
I believe that's right.
Yeah, Ben's-
None of these have been condemnations. These have all been voluntary buyouts. The city has access to those federal funds for flood-prone property buyouts. As properties have come for sale, there's been increases that are being made by the city if the folks in this area want to take advantage of that. The bowling alley, one of the hotels, the Dunkin' Donuts, all those have been acquired as part of that program. So all that lays the groundwork to help us with this strategic conversion through here. Obviously, we think that having this linear parkland through here will help make an enhancement for these properties and help make them attractive from a redevelopment standpoint. This part of the project really doesn't have the legs to get underway until, by the same strategy we employed over here, DOT is ready to start thinking about replacing the bridges at Atlantic Avenue. That'll really be the impetus for us to start working on developing the framework for this and putting it into place. The elements associated with Person Street renaming this, that may take place soon. The City Council did include a project in the transportation bond to install a roundabout here at the intersection of Wake Forest, Atlantic, Automotive Way, Brookside, and that's consistent with both the Capitol Boulevard planning and the Blunt Person Corridor planning
That's
as
in
well.
front of the circus?
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
So
that's right. All things are referenced by food.
So that roundabout is going to happen?
Yes.
Okay.
And so it's already been incorporated into the planning for the corridor. Phase 1, which includes changes in the striping and resurfacing, that's going to take place in the next couple of months. And then the roundabout should be, I think, in 3 years, based on the funding that's allocated in the CIP.
And you're turning Person into two-way, is that right? Remember?
That is the next step of the plan, that's right. So the short-range plan will be restriping of Wake Forest, Blunt, and Person. One of the first goal was to get the lanes to be more uniform. So right now there's sections of that corridor that go 2 lanes, 3 lanes, 2 lanes. We're going to have it so it's uniformly striped, it's 2 lanes, and there'll be a bike lane added on each street. And then the next phase of that will be converting those to 2-way operation. It's a higher lift for that because of how many traffic signals there are on the corridor that made from 1-sided to 2-sided. And then we are conjoining that with the roundabout construction that's going to be here.
So the city's only buying out properties along on the north or northwest side of Pigeon House Branch, northeast side?
Through this area. Now, Pigeon House comes, it's kind of funky if I remember correctly. So it kind of comes up through here and then it goes underground and I think it comes out, I want to say here, and then comes across. So part of this actually allows for some daylighting in Pigeon House with the street strategy. So you'll have, crossing here, but with doing the Person Street extension and then running it on the back side of the stream, that will eliminate that crossing, open that back up.
That's all floodplain land in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it kind of keeps visible.
Yep. I think those are the three major elements that we have currently active with the corridor. I'll be happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Well, it's great hearing all this wonderful transit issue. If only we were the transit-related board and commission, what do you see as the environmental implications?
On what front?
Every front.
Okay.
You know, the fact that you're here talking to us and we are the environmental advisory board begs the question, what are the environmental implications?
Okay, so we talked a lot specifically about stormwater aspects in this corridor. As we talk now about the implementation of the Wake Transit Plan, Capitol Boulevard is now under consideration for some type of bus rapid transit investment. And so we're talking through now what the shape of that would look like, what some different alternatives would be, how far the extents would run, and where we would set the groundwork for future extensions. Obviously, from an environmental standpoint, with the transit plan implementation, there's a significant air quality benefit that goes along with that. We're looking at opportunities for making the city more transit friendly, and that has an associated development pattern that goes along with that. All of that makes the framework for the city to be more walkable. All of that has a substantial air quality benefit associated with that.
Of course, the downside of making a road more wonderful is more car traffic, which hurts air quality. So the sooner we can get mass transit and convince people to get out of their cars.
Yeah. So everything that we're talking about with capital is interesting, because right now, everything with this is not talking about adding any capacity. And what's really interesting with Capitol Boulevard is that Capitol reached peak traffic in the early 1970s. At one point, the southern leg of Capitol, south of Wade, was the highest traveled state highway in North Carolina. It had almost 100,000 cars a day on it. That changed once we built the entirety of the Raleigh Beltline, and traffic volumes on that section have dipped, if I'm not mistaken, down to between 50 and 60,000, and have stayed relatively static for the past 30 years. There's been a recent bump in traffic on Capitol Boulevard, and what we're attributing that to is some global changes in traffic pattern that occurred because of Fortify. That people, because of traffic concerns in the work zone on I-40 on the south side of Raleigh, we saw some global changes in traffic patterns. More people using the northern portion of the Beltline. We actually had people that we determined were using the eastern portion of the Beltline, coming down Capitol Boulevard, and then going out Wade Avenue. I mean, really unusual shifts in patterns. Everything we're talking about here is really a rebuild of the existing Capitol Boulevard, and it's not intended, even with all the substantial growth we've had downtown over the past 20 years, that traffic pattern has stayed relatively static. And it's one of the reasons why we really feel strongly about the need for denser mixed-use development, because it does not generate the same amount of traffic that single-use spread out development does.
If only the belt lines to which you're saying much of the Capitol Boulevard traffic fled were somehow magically air pollution free. So maybe some of the air pollution has gone to the poor schmucks or who live near the belt line.
I mean, there will be a lot more traffic only because the density is going up.
Not necessarily.
Really?
Again, when you look at how much development has taken place in downtown Raleigh in the last 20 years, you look at our traffic volumes on the surrounding streets, it's been relatively flat. And again, this is one of the attributes of having a walkable mixed-use environment, is that you don't have to get in your car to do everything.
Right, no,
Yeah. So we haven't seen that corresponding growth. In fact, there's been some good conversations recently about Seattle and how Seattle has increased its density and increased in its transit offerings, and how it's actually seen a slight reduction in the amounts of vehicle miles traveled.
Yeah, I'm all for density. I'm just wondering where those people living downtown, I mean, they're not all working downtown. They're community RTP or, Durham, Chapel Hill, so you might have a reverse.
Yeah. Or in downtown.
Hopefully
our
downtown,
employment
yes,
base in downtown has, again, in the past 20 years, has dramatically increased.
Yeah.
We haven't seen a corresponding increase in traffic, which we're delighted by.
But again, what we need to really control this is frequent mass transit, not buses every God knows how many half hours or hours. Until then, it ain't gonna look much like Seattle.
The framework for the bus rapid transit system will, at peak hour, have buses operating every 10 minutes and an off-peak every 15 minutes.
You talked about to wake up the county last night.
This is totally unrelated to traffic and this, but it's related to the road here. What's gonna happen to the time light tower?
No changes as of right now, from what I understand.
The time light tower? I'm one of the big fans
The
of
art
that.
piece.
The
is
objet
the whole
d'art
piece. Yeah.
on Capitol Boulevard.
Oh, yeah.
So that's located
That's
right here, just in
Fairview.
advance of Fairview
Controversy.
Interchange. I'm not aware, it's not being affected by any of the construction with this, and I'm not aware of any conversations.
Probably
at this
need
time.
the T olives to be cut back some, but you see it much better going north than you
Yeah.
It's never been particularly visible from the south based on its
Yeah.
placement. It was always really very visible from as you're headed southbound from the north.
Or looping around Wade Avenue.
No, it's a.
Thing, I get a
on
nice view of it
Fairview.
there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Two quick questions, Eric. Where will the traffic coming out of the Kane building empty out into? And second, are there any trees planted for peace at all?
Yeah, so one of the things that this afforded us to do, one of the betterments that the city is covering the cost on,
Yeah.
is street trees.
Okay, good.
So, you'll notice that,
The better.
yeah, so like I said, we're extending the framework of the city's downtown. That means that we're installing a city street pattern that's commensurate with what we have downtown. So the sidewalk design is a big part of that, so you'll see the same type of 14-foot Capitol Grid sidewalk that you see on many of the block faces around City Hall. But as part of that, you'll also see street trees and tree pits that are along here, so you'll see that along all these streets.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, we're very excited about that. You said 2 questions?
Well, just where the traffic will empty out of that
Oh, that's
Kane
right.
building.
And this is not the best image for that, because like I said, the new street will be here. They'll have access points, I believe, on Johnson Street. I want to say they may have one on Harrington, but I can't say that for sure. They have a right-in driveway off of Peace. It's not a right in, right out, but there'll be a small median out here along this section of Peace. And they may have access on West Street. And that's consistent with what you see in a downtown environment. We didn't want a lot of driveways, as we don't want to interfere with the pedestrian environment as well as possible. But they've got some separate access considerations. The parking areas for the retail and the parking areas for the residential are segregated. So there's some separation for that. Any other questions?
So completion of the Peace Street and the Wade Avenue flyover.
By the end of 2019.
Seems like it's going faster than that.
It's moving right along. The next big thing you're gonna see from an impact standpoint is when they make the first shift of traffic over onto the new bridge that's under construction right now.
So will Wade or Peace be done first?
Wade should be done first, if I'm not
They
mistaken.
started it
Yes.
Well,
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.